Um, well, ladies and gentlemen, and councillors, it being 7 p.m., I now would like to begin the meeting. The membership is as listed. Obviously, the mayor, Councillor Cetus, is still away. I will continue to act on his behalf, and in question time, I will continue to act and answer questions on for the council. I also, and he's the only apology, but I do have a note from Councillor Villela, who's running late, but she will be joining us this evening. The other note I should mention about the membership is last night I spoke to the CEO, Mr. Dev, who is recovering after some surgery. On behalf, when I spoke to Mr. Dev, I wished, and I know I speak for the whole council and the wider and everyone involved with council, in wishing him a speedy recovery. And so, obviously, I'll publicly say, on behalf of council, I wish him a speedy recovery, and in his absence for this week, Mr. Steve Hamilton will act on Mr. Dev's behalf as acting CEO, and look forward to continuing to work with Steve. Mr. Hamilton, sorry. So that is the membership and apologies. Do I have any disclosures of conflicts of interest?
No, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Okay. Could I have the confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting?
Happy to second it.
And so that's moved. Councillor Greco. Seconded by Councillor Williams. Do you have any notes that you would add? Any discussion on the matter?
No.
No. Okay then. In that case, then I will put it to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, and that's carried. Could I now go for reports by the mayor and councillors? I call Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Just a couple of things to report on. I attended a public forum that's a fundraiser for diverse and Jaka neighbourhood house, and it's looking at sustainable population. I think Councillor Lawrence was there, and it was a very well organised forum, and there were some thought-provoking questions and quite entertaining discussion. So certainly was a well-organised event. Also attended with some other councillors the switching on the Lysa Big Economy Reserve, which councillors might recall was a funding that we allocated to the Preston Lions soccer team a couple of years ago. They have completed the upgrade with the assistance of council money, as well as funding from Sport and Recreation Victoria and their own club, and it was a very successful venture. And I can report that they have a thriving club, a growing club membership list, drawing from people of all walks of life, including those from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, and women and those from different nationality and ethnic backgrounds. So these are the two things I like to highlight. The rest is up there for people to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I just want to make one note. The word Darebin there should be listed after school. It's the launch of the Victorian Ballet School Darebin, as it's been retitled, and so just that correction for the minutes. And I actually had the pleasure of attending the launch of a new school, ballet school in Northcote, which was previously in Fitzroy, and I understand they lost their former home and have had to find a new home, and we're really proud to have them here in the city of Darebin. And it was great to see some of the performances by some of the students, and also to have the launch by a member of the Australian Ballet, a former member of the Australian Ballet, who came to Northcote to launch this new school, which will be great. And they'll be providing dance classes across a range of forms, not just ballet, for old and young, and a great asset to our community.
How many kids?
And lots of kids as well, so which is great. I just want to highlight one thing which councillors might be aware of. There's been quite a bit of interest in the future of the site formerly known as Jim's Fish and Chips, and I just acknowledge Roy Sasonkin, who's here tonight, I noticed in the audience, who's taken over that site, and particularly the future of the famous shark that sits atop the shop. And of course this is one of many iconographic elements in our city, and represents the rich cultural and migrant history of the city of Darebin and the family-owned businesses. So I just want to acknowledge the extraordinary contribution that our local traders, people like Jim and Pam, who ran the fish and chip shop there in High Street for 46 years, the contribution that they've made, the connection that they've had with so many residents, and not just the extra potato cakes they've thrown in for everyone, but also I think the fact that they have survived and have had the benefit, I think, of seeing so much change in Northcote, but of course also having had a business that's operated successfully over many years, but also I think part of the heart of Northcote. It's great to see them obviously finish with a great retirement, and well deserved after so many years of service through their small business. So congratulations to them, and welcome to the new business that's taken over as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy, and I would associate myself with Councillor McCarthy's work, and I am too familiar with the Victorian Ballet School. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I'd just like to point out two items, which is the Domestic Animal Management Reference Group. It was actually a very large number of people that attended on Friday, so it was quite interesting to have a very robust discussion amongst different groups and rescue teams and that actually rescue animals, and how we can actually do some preventative work, which I will be doing an amendment later on today for Agenda Item 8.3. The other item would be Preston Bull Ants, the fundraising dinner, which is a wonderful night. It's about fundraising, which most people would know. The Bull Ants are located at the Preston City Oval, across the road from the Preston Market. They do a wonderful job getting, obviously, teens and parents together, where they just join, have a dinner dance, and they raffle off and auction some memorabilia stuff. It's very important that they do a lot of socialising and getting groups together, but most of all it's to promote and do as much as they can for a new generation of kids that are coming into footy playing, whether it's girls or boys. So yeah, so that was a wonderful night. So that was Friday night, and I couldn't attend the opening lights there with the girls playing sport. So I was at the fundraising, which was probably more enjoyable at the time. Warmer, anyway. That was all. Thank you.
Very important, Councillor Williams. Councillor Fontana.
Thank you, Mr Acting Chair. Look, just a couple of items. Just briefly, the BT Collins Reserves Lights launch, which 4 councillors were there. Yourself, beg your pardon, Councillor Greco, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Lee, and Councillor Glover. And I actually need to congratulate the club, who has had a bit of history in the past, but more importantly in the last few years, it's really got its act together in expanding opportunities for youth at the club. And figures which were mentioned tonight, that they've increased participation of 80 kids to over 250 in a matter of a few years. And they need to be commended for that effort. But more importantly, on the night itself, we were actually fortunate to watch a girls' soccer match, and it was very entertaining too. And also I'd like to mention the fact that Craig Ndarchi was there representing the opposition. As you're aware, $100,000 was donated by the then state government for the lights, and a very important asset for the West Reservoir region too. And it's going to be good if other clubs can sort of take a leaf out of the Preston Lions Club in order to expand on opportunities for our youth, and hopefully with the infrastructure that we put in place, we'll see that happen.
Thanks, thanks, Councillor Fontana. Well said. Councillor Greco.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Acting. Yeah, look, I'll just concentrate on one thing, because I think many of the other issues have been covered by other councillors, particularly in relation to the Preston Lions inauguration of their new lights. But what I'd like to just quickly highlight is the council's new solar panel program. I've had a lot of interest from residents that have called me, and residents that I've met in my travels over the last 2 weeks, when they found out about the Solar Saver program and the fact that it's running again. Many of them have actually wanted to get their names on the list in order to ensure that they can participate in the scheme this year. As we know, last year was quite successful, and we also had many people on waiting lists. So I've got a few names that in time I'll pass them on to the officers of people that want to put their names on the list in relation to this year's program. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mr. Acting Mayor. Like other councillors, I'll just mention Preston Lions opening of the lights just briefly, because it was just fantastic to go along there and see the difference that happens with budget items that get allocated from this place. So not only were the lights there, the grounds are looking very good in terms of the condition, and of course they've also laid concrete paths, and we used to have to go across mud. We used to have broken fences. The fences have been mended, so there's light, it's serviceable, and of course it starts with a pavilion that was built by Preston Council many years ago for only $250,000, by the way, too, so the lights cost more these days. But now you've got a proper facility that's very functional and servicing 3 ovals and increasing the youth and girls' participation. So it really is success for the club and for the investment the council's made. I also attended the President's Evening at Keon Park All-Stars at Donald Central Reserve, and again that was good to meet up with the club directly and everyone involved in the club. And that is again a facility that was very much substandard, and through investments by council over the last 3 or 4 years has really been transformed into a major hub for our youth. The other thing I'd like to mention, I had consultation with residents from Bundoora and Reservoir and Kingsbury and McLeod in relation to an amendment that's been lodged for an extra 70 units on the former Smorgy site, as we used to call it, or the Bundoora Towers, at 1091 Plenty Road, Reservoir. And I would mention that residents were quite shocked that only the people who were registered to the previous VCAT hearing have been notified of the plans to add 70 units and 86 car spaces. And to put that in perspective, VCAT last time knocked the proposal back down to 361 units across 6 towers. So virtually we're looking at a supersizing of the site and almost another whole tower. But of course there are plans. I think they have been now circulated to councillors, but they certainly haven't been circulated to the 700 plus people who objected, and they show that there's a very interesting fattening up of all the buildings to achieve the 70 without breaching height guidelines in general. So anyway, I would foreshadow that there's a notice of motion regarding that matter later tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Lawrence. I would like to note the events that I would like to note are the NAIDOC there are some. I do believe there are some mistakes on this list, and so I'm not sure whether to read the report as is and then amend it next week, or okay. So I reported on the Darwin United soccer club 40th anniversary last meeting, but I did actually go to a match of theirs. But I met with Craig Langdon on Friday, the mayor of Banyule, and we discussed several things that the two cities can work together on, such as grade separations, transport issues for Darwin Creek, and our stadium. And it was a productive meeting, and there's obviously a lot of common interest between our two cities. So I was happy to attend such a proactive meeting. I also went to the NAIDOC function at Government House which was a fantastic event, headed where the hosted by the governor and the governor's spouse, Justice Tony Howard, and also the Minister for Local Government. And it was good to chat to both Justice Howard and to the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs and Local Government, and also the same can be said with NAIDOC Ball. I also attended the Victorian Ballet School opening event, which was a very well attended event. It's a very different space from the space they had in Fitzroy, which was at a church hall in Fitzroy. It's the Victorian Ballet School is one that I years ago for his family and whatnot had a had an association with. So it was, but I too, like Councillor McCarthy, am glad to see they've such a good ballet school has found a home in Darwin, and like Councillor McCarthy, and proud that they're in our ward and in our city. I also, yes, and that's I think that's probably all that I will report on tonight, and I'll leave, and now I'll get on to the next item. Which is public question times, and so I turn now to public question time. Questions? Are there any? Yes. Could I? Oh no, I'll go to you first. From from the fish and chip sort of back. Yeah. Yes. If you could state your name and the and where you're from.
Hello. My name is Royce Samkin, and I'm the new owner of Jim Fish and Chip Shop, located on High Street in Northcote. Soon it will become an Israeli street food eatery that's called Tahina. I have applied to make some changes to the doorway, which will require council approval. Given that this section of High Street has heritage control, I would appreciate it if you can help me with that. I also like Council to consider heritage listing the fiberglass shark above the shop. I will be incorporating the shark into my new fit-out. However, I know many locals would like to see the shark protected in the long term as part of Northcote urban heritage. I understand that Councillor Trent McCarthy has proposed a motion to protect the shark, and I would ask that you support it. Thank you very much, Roy.
Thank you very much. The first part of your question. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. In regards to Councillor McCarthy's motion, which will be heard on the agenda tonight, because it is something on the agenda tonight. Unfortunately, I'm obviously limited as to what I can say. I can say about it without wanting to preempt the debate, of course. But in regards to the heritage stuff, the planning process will go through the normal way with officers. But for some more technical, for a more technical perspective, I might ask the acting CEO, Mr. Hamilton, to also add to the answer, if I could. Mr. Hamilton.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. If it assists, we can provide you some documentation on the process to go through, or which will be undertaken regarding the heritage assessment. But yes, as the Acting Mayor suggested, it'll go through the normal process, and we'll be in touch with you in the due course of that process as well. But happy to provide you some process type information at this point within the next week or so.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And I believe you were next. Just in front there.
Thank you. My name is Roger Digby. I live in Kingsbury, and I rang Councillor Lawrence last week regarding the changes to 109 130 Road. I was one of the original objectors to that project right from the beginning. I did receive the documentation, which, unfortunately, considering that the thing was already just a foregone conclusion, I disposed of all of the previous documentation for us. I only have the current documentation. But I note that there's been a decrease in the footprint of the buildings themselves and an increase in the number of apartments. And there's a significant number under 55 square metres in size and some under 50 square metres, 11 in fact. And that's where I object. I think that that's absolutely appalling, and I note that there's been some concern from other places in Melbourne, especially to do with the high-rise apartments around Melbourne, of the apartments that are considered too small, under 50 square metres. So I'd just like to support Councillor Lawrence, and happy to support whatever goes from the council to have that stopped.
Thank you. Look, that is obviously another item which is on the agenda for tonight. So in that case, I'm not at liberty to discuss it at this point because obviously I don't want to preempt the debate. And so thanks for that. And I then go to Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff Richards from Northcote. And I'm concerned for the elderly residents in the retirement village where I'm located at the moment. It's footpath repairs. And I'm sure you've been there along it, Mr. Mayor, because you've been playing soccer at Mayor Park, according to your report. So you may have noticed this, that there have been a number of home renovations over recent years and some tree root action. So the footpath on the western, that's the Mayor Park side, of Leinster Grove distorted crack. Council's patched it with bitumen a few times now, but it needs a safer solution as that south side is used by many persons, a number of them from the retirement village along there, and they're all using that side because they're cutting through the path to the 2 bus stops that are in the street alongside the path. So I ask, is the council aware of the state, the situation? Can you advise whether there's a budget for repairs in this current year, the year just started? If there are no plans, can the street at least be inspected to assess safety from it? That's all on the question there, but I want to acknowledge the outdoor gym that's also been put in the park there, and I'm cancelling my gym up this end and try there. I'm asking, as my 4th question there, are there any plans to offer an initial on-site coaching, something to encourage people to go and use it? I saw today father putting son on a piece of equipment there that I wouldn't have tried, but it might be some coaching is necessary there. But I really support the gym and had supported them at the 3 locations. It's terrific, and I'll be using it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. And could I first not playing soccer, I attended a soccer game, but more importantly, could I acknowledge your long and sustained commitment to Victoria Gardens, and obviously on behalf of council, we're aware of the work that you have done have done there.
Thank you.
But in terms of the planning and the footpath aspect, I will again throw over to our acting CEO, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Acting Chair. We do have an approved allocation of budget for 15-16 financial year for footpath repairs. So we'll get the specific details of that footpath, see where it sits on our list of works to do for the year. But we will inspect it and see if there's any works that need to be done in the short term. So we'll take that on notice. And with regards to the coaching or other questions, we'll also take those on notice and provide you a written response in that regard.
That's terrific. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. You in the front row, if you could state your name and where you're from.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rich Pomala. I'm the president of Community Garden, and apparently we got problem in the garden. I've written a few letters to the council, and nothing happens, like fraction things. And for the past about 5 years, we had $7,500. What we spent on the community garden was about less than $2,000. We want to know where the money's gone. Any investigation into that? Is anything that can be done? There was, well, everybody here, well, not everybody, but people like the Jim, Gaetano, saw the garden, the way it was. If anybody wants to come then have a look tomorrow, it's full of rubbish, only collecting veg here, because they don't want to spend the money on the garden. They spend the money for themselves. They got involved in different things, and they keep on bringing the receipt from the other place into the community garden to balance the book. Now, we want to know what's going on. We have to do something about it. Is there anything we can do?
Look, I will ask Mr. Hamilton, who may who then maybe the relevant director, Miss Knox, may also answer some of the question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Officers are aware of the issue that you have raised, so I guess we'll take your details again. I'm aware that there's a response being prepared, so once that gets circulated, we'll be in contact again to follow the issue up.
If someone wants to come and have a look, I can go to the garden and show everything what's going on. But we want to find out where the money's gone.
Sure.
And that's it. And we've got debt management too. If the council can renew it, everything, and start from scratch, bring the community garden back the way it was, because Tim is sold the way it was, go down and sold it, the government there, it's a tip, it's not a garden anymore. That's what we want to do, something about it. Then we don't want to close the garden. But I've done so much to build the garden, I don't want to see it like if you've got a kids. And you want to see your kid die? No, that's the same thing.
Okay. Thank you for your question, sir. We can arrange for officers or to go and have a look at the garden and assist. Next question.
Pardon?
Could I no? Next question. Do you have a Mr. Nugent?
John Nugent Epping. Mr Mayor, this is about the council agenda tonight, the master plan at Donald West.
Yep.
I met with the council officer and told her that the half netball court should be built next to the football club, as the club has a netball team. I know other people, when she came around to have a meeting at our pavilion, I know other people from our club and from the neighbours who live around that wanted the basketball court or half ball court built next to the pavilion. What has happened is that the pavilion, on tonight's paperwork, I noticed that the half court, basketball court, netball court will be built in the youth precinct, which is over in Johnson Street, which is far away to send our team over to train and so forth. I want to know why, if council officers ask for clubs to put in consultation, why don't they follow their instructions, what we give them? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Nugent. Look, I will throw over to the relevant to Mr. Hamilton and the relevant director to answer the question, but I can say that council officers do try with the consultation, as do all councillors, to get the best outcome. But I will throw over to Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. As Acting Mayor noted, the matter is being considered tonight, so it's, I can't really add a lot more to the debate other than to, I guess, direct to the report on the table. And I guess if the Director, Ms Jones, has got anything further to add, she may, but I guess the report's being considered tonight, so there's not much more I can add.
Ms Jones, no?
Nothing more to report. He's going to council tonight.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Acting Deputy, officers, managers, gallery, etc. This question starts off as a comment, first of all. Sage as public asset. Will you, the duly elected council, commit to turning the soon-to-be defunct Reservoir Library building and immediate surrounds for public use as a hub for worthwhile purposes such as community clubs or a club, of which I'm aware one was turned away just recently, namely a public training club, Preston Redlaw adult training, I think it's called Trace, or something like that, given that you have facilities there to plug in, clubs with facilities that would allow that to happen, and possibly an Aboriginal art gallery, of which expression has been shown by me, to me actually, by tourists, to act as social There's a few little hands in here that this indeed would cover. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Look, I will, if councillors wish to put something like that up to consider it, probably from a ward council, then the duly elected council will consider any proposal. I'll give you that. I'll give you that assurance. But I might also ask Mr. Hamilton if he can provide any further information.
Sure. Thank you. Through Mr. Acting Chair, there's been no consideration or no future plans for that site other than what's contained within the reservoir structure plan. So I guess once that site is, or the use of that site is moved, then I guess we'll go through the normal process of design consultation and future use assessments, which will come through to council in due course anyway.
Respectfully, can I ask a question, Mr. Hamilton? Does council own the ground that library sits on?
Mr. Hamilton.
Through Mr. Acting Chair, it is in council's hands, yes.
Okay. Do I have any further questions? Yes, you in the front row. Could you state your name and where you're from as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is George Stephanides. I'm from Mount Cooper, just regarding the 1091 development at Smorgies. I'd like to thank, first of all, Councillor Lawrence for the time that he took to meet with all the residents. With regards to item 8.1, the council is considering developing a local design standard for apartments, and having regard to the fact that the state government is also looking at developing design guidelines, which hopefully will improve the situation. I believe the apartments in Melbourne are considered poorer than the apartments in Hong Kong. Can I ask that in developing those design standards, and it looks here like we're going to base it around the New South Wales standards, if we can do that assessment on the 1091 development, I mean, 361 apartments, as VCAT decided, was a tight squeeze. It was a sardine can, if you like, and an increase of 70 is really a tighter sardine can. So the only way they could do that is by reducing the size of the apartments. So whatever they were before, they're going to be tighter now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I can understand the how important this issue is to your area. But as the matter is on the agenda, there's as per previous answers, there's very little that can be said without wanting to preempt debate. But I will ask if there's anything that Mr. Hamilton can add.
No, through Mr. Actually, nothing more really to add from myself.
Okay then. Any further questions? Mr. Thompson, again. Mr. Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is referring to my last question about the master plan at Donald West. If none of my ward councillors get up tonight and move that the basketball court be moved from the youth precinct over to next to our pavilion, does that mean the matter is dead and cannot be moved?
Well, that would be a resolution by council, and that's what would happen. It can obviously be done with a notice of rescission by council, but
Yeah, because what I'm saying to you is, my club has continually has asked, told the council officer, has even referred to it maybe to its to the councillors, that we believe that the netball basketball court should be next to our pavilion, is because we have a team, and if this and the council officer that didn't see fit and left it in the youth precedent, if none of my ward councillors get up and say we would like it to be moved and so forth, does that mean it's dead in the water and it has to stay over in that youth precedent? That's what I want to know.
Yes, there is.
It stays in the youth precedent if none of the ward councillors get up tonight and say something about it.
I'll ask Mr. Hamilton if he's got any more technical advice, but from what I understand.
Through Mr. Acting Chair, the future actions really outline the process forward in regard to this this matter as we're hearing tonight. And obviously, it is being considered by council, so I can't preempt any debate or any decisions in that regard. But I guess the only thing I can add is that the actions sort of spell out the way forward for this project. So there's probably not more I can add really.
Okay then. Do I have any further questions? No further questions. Okay then. I will draw question time to a close then. Councillor Boella, do you have any conflicts of interest or anything?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies for my late arrival. Yes, I do. I understand there is a general business item in relation to the Preston Market, if I recall. I will declare direct interest due to Preston Market sponsoring our DVD, Munja Munja DVD, and I will be exiting the chamber. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Okay. Thanks for that, Miss. Thanks for that, Councillor Boella. Okay. Could I move? The net item 7 is the assemblies of councillors. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move that, Mr. Acting Chair.
Moved Councillor McCarthy. Seconded Councillor Fontana. Is there any issues or debate with that?
No, it's just for noting, Mr. Acting Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McCarthy. So I'll put that to vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Consideration of reports. Item 8.1.
Happy to move that, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Okay. Thanks. That moved.
Happy to second.
Seconded Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Boella.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I'm very happy to move this recommendation. It responds to a general business item that I put forward at council meeting on the 4th of May. And the general business item was in 4 parts, but effectively it was to respond to the Victorian government announcing that it will be seeking submissions regarding concerns around the quality of apartments that are being built. And upon reading that in the Age, I think, I was very keen for council to participate in that consultation process, because, as you're well aware, Mr. Acting Mayor, at planning committees, there's often a significant and consistent frustration because we are beholden to the planning, planning act and whatever, but it's a lot of it is silent on internal amenities, size of apartments, and often we're presented with poor internal designs and sizes, and there's nothing we can actually do about it. So I was really pleased that that the GB item that I put forward was supported at council, and the recommendation here responds to the fourth item of my GB item, which is that council officers prepare a submission to the proposed discussion paper based on to the paper, sorry. So what we have here, Mr Mayor, is, Mr Acting Mayor, we have a copy of the submission, and it's available, you know, for the public to read. But just to surmise, it was great to read that officers had done a lot of work already in this area. We spent a lot of time developing policies, material around some of these weaknesses. But so it's a very well thought through report submission, and it does look at internal amenity. It looks at embedded internal design, the size of apartments, and it is also, Mr Mayor, Acting Mayor, a very nuanced and sophisticated submission. It doesn't make blanket statements like, you know, it's all about the size, and we should follow the no less than 55 square metres, but that there might be a need for smaller ones to make them more affordable. However, if they're going to be smaller, they need to be well designed to take into effect, you know, natural light, etc., etc. So I really welcome the submission. I think to me, it shows that there's a lot of work that's been put into it over the years. It is an intelligent submission, and I would like to congratulate and thank the officers, because as you can see, Mr Acting Mayor, a lot of time has gone into this. And overall, I'd like to welcome the government, the state government's invitation to have a state discussion around, I think, issues that are concern councils across the state. There is obviously a need, as reported in our submission, for there to be state controls so that there's consistency across the state, and we're not sort of beholden to VCAT decisions that, you know, hit and miss, and we don't know exactly where we stand until the decision comes down, because each one is judged on its merit. The submission calls for consistency. It calls for a high standard of livability and the building of apartments, because this is what I think the community deserves, because it is about quality of life, and it is about creating best practice with the future apartment building, which is on a steady increase in Darebin. And we need the support of state legislation to ensure that we get the best possible outcomes for an inevitable development in Darebin and indeed across the state. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Villela. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Acting Chair, and I would thank Councillor Villela for actually putting this on our agenda, because I think it's given us the opportunity to not only put forward what is, I think, a very well thought through and well considered submission, but also represent some of the frustrations that I think we've experienced at a council level when we want to see greater livability outcomes in relation to apartment design, but we are constrained by the limits of both the state planning scheme and of course res code provisions as well. I just would draw council's attention to some of the poor examples that we've had of apartment design here in this city, and I think they serve as the instructing examples in terms of this submission. We had the experience here in this chamber a couple of years ago with a proposal for a 7-storey building next to, I believe, what was a 4-storey building. The 7-storey building, of course, would block sunlight to the apartments on the 4-storey building, which was to its south. Of course, the apartments on the north side of this the apartment to the south had light wells, which relied upon what is referred to in the submission as borrowed amenity. So here we have a situation where a development has gone ahead, borrowing light from the adjoining property, because the expectation there would be nothing built on that to the direct north. That should have been foreseen. That site to the corner was always eventually going to be redeveloped, and yet a department process was able to be put through whereby now the property owner and the renters in that development now have to deal with essentially darkness unless they turn on an electric light. That is not a way for people to live. That is not the sort of urban development that I think anyone is really looking for. And when it comes to the sorts of cues that both council and government are sending to the so-called development community, people that actually do these developments, they need to have clear rules and clear guidelines that actually put in place what is appropriate and what isn't. And when you have these instances, and the submission makes very clear examples, gives clear reference to what the impact is of borrowed amenity on the livability of an apartment, we start to see the situation that could emerge not just in the city of Darebin, in places like Northcote where it has occurred, and I mentioned also the Gainesville building in High Street, which you can see an example there of borrowed amenity, which eventually will be a point of conflict for people that live in those apartments, but all the way through the city of Darebin and beyond. So I'm really pleased with the submission. I will thank the officers for their hard work, and this is near and dear to our hearts, this particular issue.
Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I also would like to make some comments in relation to this, what I consider to be a very, very important issue. And again, as Councillor McCarthy, I thank Councillor Villella to bringing this to our attention. I think it's also quite timely that the state government is actually reviewing or starting the process of consultation to review the planning guidelines, particularly around apartments. And I noticed that in our application we're also extending the idea not only within the Melbourne metropolitan area but across the whole state. I think it's important because I also think that the state government has also come to the realisation that something needs to be done around this space. You cannot rely on market forces to deliver you appropriate accommodation that people can seriously call a home and can seriously call a place where we have fine amenity as we've been used to. What our report, that our submission looks towards, it talks about quality versus yield, and I think this is the fundamental issue about do we go for better quality? And quality does not necessarily mean costing more. It can mean also a more clever way of actually doing things. And I think it's particularly pertinent to Darebin because if you look in the report on page 7, in Darebin by 2036 there will be an additional 13,600 dwellings in our city, and I would contend that most of those dwellings will be apartments in our city, and so this is quite timely. If something comes out of this government review in terms of tightening up around the regulations that govern planning. So I'm glad that we put in a submission, and I'm hoping that the government, hearing all these submissions by the various municipalities, will actually start to take some action in providing a little bit more regulation around this. And I'll just end on this final point. I mean, tonight we have a notice of motion by Councillor Lawrence in relation to the Smorgasbord site. That's a typical example here we have where Council fought hard to limit the development of that site, and now what we see in VCAT that the applicants are trying to extend that site and trying to increase the amount of dwellings on that site, clearly going against the grain of what the state government itself is trying to do. It's probably the last chance for developers to actually try and create shoeboxes in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? If not, I propose to put that to their vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Could I note that carried unanimously? And then item 8.2, the Donouth Central Master Plan.
Before that, sorry, I had a question, but if Councillor
I'll just. I was going to move a motion with an amendment. I don't know if that will limit the question or add to it.
I was happy to second it, Mr Acting Mayor.
I'll move the motion with the amendment, and then we can just read the questions.
Okay.
So I move the motion as printed, except that after the words Donath West Reserve, we have the additional words and a netball court in Donath Central Reserve near Donath Central Pavilion.
Okay with that. Do I have a seconder?
I was happy to second it. So I'll just need to read that again. Yes, just a point of clarification, if I may.
Councillor
Just a point of
Borrell.
clarification. I'm happy to second it.
Okay.
Just
I'll take
through
you
you,
as a seconder.
question to Councillor Lawrence. So the intention is to keep it, so to add a netball court. So we have the half court.
Next to the
An extra. Yeah, happy to, very happy to second that. Thank you.
Okay. I've got. I know there may be some comments from officers here, but I will. But before I do that, I will call for questions. And I know Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Greco, if you could.
Sorry.
Yeah. Councillor McCarthy, you had some questions.
Look, it's just a very basic practical question. I think when we look at the scope of something, and in this case it's expanding the scope, I just wanted to get an indication in relation to the process. If the size of the project may involve additional costs to that which is budgeted, whether that will then come back to council for a decision. I just don't want us to run short on other elements of the project. So, when will we get a costing based on the additional point? I've got no problem with the substance of what's proposed. I just want to understand the financial impact when we make a decision in relation to that. Or can it be incorporated, in fact, as part of the existing project?
Mr Hamilton.
Through Mr Acting Chair, we do have obviously an approved capital works budget which has been allocated to various projects as submitted and approved by council. We would need to consider how this, if approved, might affect that budget and the budget allocation therewith. It's probably not something we can answer tonight, but happy to provide further information pending council's decision on this matter. But as it stands, what's been presented in the report was as per the budgeted allocation. So,
Councillor Lawrence.
Just a minor point. So this isn't too futuristic. Can we change 2106 to 2016?
Sometimes it takes that long, council time. We're talking council time.
I'm sure that's okay.
If I can just, I did sort of ask two questions, I think, accidentally, which was just a clarity about any revised costings in relation to the project. Would that then come back to council, or is that at officer's discretion?
Mr Hamilton.
I guess through Mr Acting Chair, we would, if it sat outside the approved budget, we would come back to council for approval. I guess the consideration council would need to look at is where that funding may come from, whether it's through savings through the year or therewith, but we definitely need to come back to the outside budget.
Okay, Councillor Viola.
I just have a further amendment, if I may, Mr Acting Mayor.
Yep, that's okay.
I've just that officers present a copy of the design plan at a councillor briefing prior to delivery of the youth precinct netball. I think we have to add netball court now and barbecue area. It's just a minor point, but I think we've had discussions, Mr Acting Mayor.
Happy to accept that amendment.
Recently, that it's just good to provide that feedback and know what it's going to look like, just for quality control. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
If there are no questions, I'll call Councillor Lawrence as the mover.
Yes, Mr Acting Chair. I thank Councillor Villela for her addition, because that will obviously give us a chance to also examine the financial implications of this, I'm sure, at that point in time. Why I've raised these amendments, and obviously there's been consultation going on in terms of master plans by the council staff for a while, and there's also been previous master plans at Donath Central, at Donath Overall Reserve, which is made up of quite a series of ovals, including Donath West, Donath Central. So the issue with these series of master plans has been about how to increase participation, and obviously the key area now for this council has been increased gender participation in sports. And a key feature of that has been at state government for a long time is to increase netball participation with associated football clubs. So the master plan at Donald Reserve presents a very good opportunity to create a half-ball netball close to the football club that has an associated netball team, number one. Number two, on the Johnston Street side, as has been identified by the officers, is underutilised resources aimed at youth. And in fact, there's a youth club, etc., on that side towards Keelan Park. You know, the development of barbecue and other support area, support materials over there, and a basketball court to complement the skating facilities there, which is adjacent to male cricket teams, male soccer teams, etc., is wise. But from my point of view, from a gender point of view, given basketball is a mixed sport, we have an opportunity to increase passive participation there. And given that we have a nucleus of a netball team next to Donna Central, I think that we really need to take this opportunity to try and create more participation and more of these half courts. Now, I welcome Councillor Villal's suggestions regarding coming back to council, because I will have a lot to say about half courts of basketball, having spending too much of my time at them in Darebin, and there's some design problems going on with them in terms of functionality, and the same thing applies to netball. So we do need to lift our game in terms of ensuring that they are functioning facilities, and that includes proper line marking, etc. So, you know, I welcome to get to see them back, because it's not just this city. I've seen it in Canberra, I've seen it in other suburbs. There's a lot of token facilities built, and they're not practical. So that's good. And obviously, Councillor Trent McCarthy has pointed out quite rightly, this may add tens of thousands of dollars to this, because it requires bitumen and poles and things. So we do need to have that come back to us to see the budget implications.
Councillor Bilala. I believe you have a seconder.
Yeah, but Councillor
Oh, sorry, no, so I thought you...
Okay then.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Look, notwithstanding the budgetary, considerations that might present themselves, I think what we have here with the addition of the netball court, I think we've got the right balance in terms of prioritising what we need there at the Donald West Reserve. I remember we have had GB items around the developing a youth precinct in that area. From the beginning of my term, because that is an area that is really in need of some attention. A youth precinct and near the Keelan Park station. So I think I really welcome, and I think the community will welcome, that we've actually prioritised the youth precinct. That's very important. The netball court is also another priority, and I was also very happy that the barbecue area was decided as a bit of a priority, because in the consultations that I attended, and there were many in that area, the need for a barbecue area was quite obvious. The community wants to gather there. Not everyone goes there to play sport. We cater for that as well, but what the community wants is for it to be a welcoming place that for families to come and have a barbecue and just spend the day out. I think that's what one part of what the community wants to see there. It's a big space, and we know that there is a real. The other side of Reservoir has Edwards Lake, and that's well utilised. But the east side really has a deficit in that kind of parkland community hub space, and I think this is very much what the community wanted. So I was pleased to see that that's a priority. So I'd like to thank the officers for the time. I also would like to thank the community that has been very committed to the consultation process. We really got a very clear sense of what the community wants, and what's really lovely about that area, Mr Acting Mayor, is that the community really cares. The community is very proud of that reserve, and they really want to see it work, and they really want to see it work for not just themselves, but for generations to come. And I think that's why there is a lot of interest in it. We've got to get it right. And we've got to make sure that, as Councillor McCarthy said, the design's right, it's functional, it's high quality. That's what we need, because it should be there for generations to come. We've got to make sure that we do the right thing by the community. But I think it's a good start. Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor.
Councillor Greco, you'd indicated you'd like to say
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Look, I've just got a simple amendment that I just want to add, and just to pick up on the points about the budget implications, because I think it's only proper from a governance perspective that we put that in the motion. So after the words design plan, we have two additional, we have and budget implications.
Happy to accept that amendment.
Oh, yep.
Okay. Would you like to speak to your amendment?
Okay. Yes, I will. Look, I won't go over what Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Villela have said. Look, I think it's a very worthy project, but I take the point that it may have some budget implications. I note in the report here that the commencement will be, or construction will occur in the early part of 2016. So I think this will give us ample time to work out what the budget implications are. And because in mid-year we have a review of the budget to see whether there's any excess money or surplus monies or not. And I'm sure that we'll be easily able to accommodate if there is any additional expense. So I fully support the project, and I'm sure that we'll be able to accommodate it once we look at the budget implications. Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. If there's any further speakers...
if I can just say a couple of words, if I may, through Mr.
Councillor McCarthy, sure.
Look, it's just, I think it's just to note that it's clear from the report and from the work that's been done that there is a desire and I think a support from officers to have the half-court basketball and netball included as part of the project. The point here is, when does that component actually get funded and when does it get built? The report states that it's one of the key components, but of course the funding is not part of that. And the issue here is that with these sorts of projects, and I've seen this in other areas, when you go out there and you talk about what we're going to do and you talk about the amount of money that's allocated, one of the questions that often comes up from the community is, what about a half-court basketball? Well, that's something we'd like to do, but we don't have money for it. So that can be seen as something that's not possible in the minds of some community members, because the idea of multi-phase master plans with multiple year funding is actually something that's a difficult thing sometimes when people are looking at what the project's going to be in the next year. So I think if we're serious about actually delivering the kind of access to netball and basketball in our local areas, as well as our big stadium project, we actually need to make sure we've got the money in there up front to give that confidence to the community. And I think had Mr Nugent not raised this tonight, then we probably wouldn't have had that point on the agenda, and I think it's really important we recognise...
For many years, sorry, Councillor McCarthy, many years.
I think the point here is that the critical point here is that with these sorts of projects, when we go through the capital works budget process, we actually need to look seriously at how much money is allocated, can we actually deliver what the community really wants and needs, and do we actually need to make greater provision for these sorts of facilities in the future, because we're sort of doing things that I think around the wrong way in some respects on this one, but I'm pleased that we've had this intervention tonight to actually address this issue. So I think it's a good outcome if the motion passes.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? If not, I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. And all those against? No against? Okay, and that's carried unanimously.
Mr Chair, could we have that noted?
Yeah. Okay, 8.3, de-sexing of cats for pensioners and concession card holders. Councillor Williams.
Mr Acting Mayor, I do actually have an amendment.
Yeah.
That Council actually undertakes a program of prevention within its existing operating budget to hit cluster hotspot areas in Darebin, offering a de-sexing to cats, and consider a further allocation of $8,000 to the operating budget for further preventative de-sexing works from any identified savings from the mid-year budget review.
Happy to second that.
Okay then. So that's moved with the amendment, and so let's move Councillor Williams, and it's seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Williams.
Council has already committed $50,000 towards treating of desexing dogs and flea treatment, and also worming of cats for the 2015-2016 budget. However, there has been no money put aside towards prevention of any type of program, and it seems we seem to be chasing our tails while we're catching these cats and we're trying to desex them, when we actually need to get in beforehand and actually do some sort of preventative cause instead. So look, what this program actually allows council to do is work with rescue groups to reduce the number of cats that are multiplying, and this money will actually go towards, which is 1 vet, 2 nurses. They attend like 3 times a year hotspot cluster areas, and what they will actually do is like a speed desexing on the premises in an actual van. This has been quite successful in other municipalities of Banyule, where they've been hiring out the RSPCA van and have been going to hotspot cluster areas, and it seems to be working quite well because they're actually using a preventative format rather than actually chasing their tails, which is what we've actually been doing. So hopefully if we can try and get catch it in advance and do a preventative form, then we can be able to have a better outcome for the next year. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. And Councillor Williams, just so we're sure, point 1 will still. Point 1 will be as it appears on the notice paper.
So yes.
And that's
so
point 2.
Yes, I'm happy to recommend that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Williams, and I assume Councillor McCarthy, you're happy with that?
Yes. Yep.
Councillor McCarthy.
If I can just support Councillor Williams' additional point, and just note that as a council, we, like most metropolitan councils, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on pound fees every year as a result of a system that is inherently flawed. And the system is basically that we know where the majority of the unwanted animals are and where they come from, and we know that this is as much not just an animals issue, but it's a social issue. We have people in our community who, for a whole range of reasons, don't feel comfortable or confident, or maybe even can't afford to actually access desexing services for animals that are in their care, particularly cats. And so we have a constant problem. We've worked really closely as a council, and we have been a pioneer in terms of working with rescue groups to actually try to reduce the number of animals going to the pound and reduce the number of animals being euthanised at the pound. But we really need to approach the problem at source, which is that we need to go to those areas, as the City of Banyule has and other councils have, and actually provide the service to people who can't afford it in an intensive way to minimise the number of unwanted animals being born that end up, of course, at the pound, which then becomes an additional cost to council and, of course, to ratepayers. So spending a bit more money up the front end through prevention, just like a preventative health model, actually saves you a fortune down the line. And this is, as I said, a social issue, not so much just an animals issue. So we can treat it and we can tackle it by taking a more intensive approach. And I'll just make the point as well that we have allocated money in our budget for the subsidies to animal rescue groups. What this is actually doing is making the work of those animal rescue groups even easier by actually working with the community members that they're currently supporting who can't afford to keep these animals and, of course, have an ongoing problem. So I think this is a really good endeavour. I think it's based on the general business item that has come, that is ushered in this report, and I think it's the right way for us to go.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCarthy. Do I have any further speakers? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Yep. Can that be unanimous, as per Councillor Williams's request? Thank you very much. Okay, 8.4.
Happy to move it, Mr Acting Mayor.
I'll second it, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Mr Acting Mayor, I just have a number of additional points, if I
Let's
may.
hear them. Let's hear them.
In addition to point 1 and 2, which are pretty straightforward, point 3, redesign the client information flow and voucher to A, represent a more dynamic and positive image of acting and aging residents in the graphics, and B, provide some text in the main non-English languages. It could be as simple as bon appetit, and how we say that in different languages. I think that speaks for itself that we can, that we need to be mindful of the CALD community, and something as simple as how you say that in 10 languages can make it a bit more accessible to people from non-English speaking languages, because I think the communication is important. And number 4, contact other restaurants in the area to provide greater cultural diversity. The Thai restaurants, Off the Boat and other pizza outlets. I have since been informed, Mr Acting Mayor, that the Thai restaurant and I think also Off the Boat are not open on Tuesdays. So if we can eliminate, because the vouchers, the program is only, pilot program is only on Tuesdays at the moment. So, but the pizza is missing, and I think we need pizza. I'll talk to you about pizza in a moment.
I'm sure you will, Councillor Boyle.
Yeah, and point number 5, that the pilot program review include an analysis of access to transportation or availability, because I think that the pilot program doesn't provide transport, assisted transport, community transport to the restaurants or cafes, and I think that might be an area that if people haven't got access to transport assistance, it might stop them. So I just want that to be included in the review.
That's fine, but you might want to, when you speak to it, you might want to.
Yeah, I'm happy to make sure that the seconder is aware of what is seconded. Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Do you have anything further to add, Councillor Boyle?
Can I speak to it?
Yeah, you can. Yes,
okay,
you can.
Happy
and
to.
It's noted.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Look, thank you, Councillor Greco, for seconding. I'm really excited about the Darebin Cafe Meals program. This is and it's taken officers a long time to get this happening, and I respect the time that it's taken, because if we're going to do it, we do it right. And there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make this happen, and it's almost a radical departure from what we here at Council have been doing in relation to the assisted meals program for the community home and community care residents. That is the HAC residents. So those who get assisted government assistance for their meals. So what this cafe or Darebin Cafe Meal program looks at, Mr Acting Mayor, is to provide a bit of diversity with how we as a council provide meals to our aged citizens. Now, the fact that we have a more diverse ageing population, not everyone who is old is at risk where they can actually leave the house. So what this program is aiming to do is to address that and make and see the issue of not just eating a meal, but also addressing social isolation, because we have a problem in the community, Mr Acting Mayor, that people often don't get out. And it's really important that social connectedness is happening, and this is one way that we can assist that. And what a better way than to enjoy that kind of increased quality of life than to go out and share a meal with your fellow residents, etc. So this provides an alternative. It's already been established at other councils, namely Yarra and Maribyrnong. So this kind of shift towards a more integrated capacity building, if you like, type of program is already there, and I think it's where things are heading. So much so, Mr Acting Chair, that the program has drawn significant interest from the Office of Senior Victorians. Because there is acknowledgement out there in the community, as I said, that our population is ageing. So what that means is that we've got a greater cohort, and the needs of that group is diverse. And we have to respond to that, and this is an exciting way to respond to it. So this is only a pilot program. It's a great start. I think it's very wise to have a set time in which we can then review and respond to what comes out of that review, and hopefully it will just develop and grow as the years go by. Just the minor changes I've added there, Mr Acting Mayor, it's just, I really think the way we present this is important, and it needs to speak to the flyer, etc., needs to speak to our CALD community. And so I always think using different languages with a simple word like bon appetit, however you say that in all the the key languages, I think is a small step but very powerful message. In relation to number 4, look, I just think we need to be. I know it's only a small project, and there's only a small number of venues, but pizza is cheap. People love it, and I think it might be a possibility in Reservoir. I know that, unfortunately the Thai restaurants are not open. It's a shame because they're fabulous and they're quite accessible. But pizza, and I don't want to name the 2 or 3 that I know in the area, but it's an affordable option, and hopefully they will be approached. So that's about it, Mr Acting Mayor. Again, I'd like to thank the officers. It's taken a while. There's a lot of work that's gone behind this particular project, but I think it's really exciting, and it's something that can put Darebin on the map in relation to servicing the aged community in a really proactive way. Thank you, Mr Acting.
Thank you, Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I also would like to speak on this because it's been a long time coming in relation to this initiative, and I think it's one of those initiatives that I think Darebin can be proud of in terms of being a trendsetter in regards to providing innovation around giving people, providing alternatives to the Meals on Wheels scheme, which is very, very important. But as Councillor Lella said, there are other ways to approach the providing meals for people that need them. We know, for example, that some of this thinking has come out of the UK, where the UK, the thinking was, rather than thinking in silos about Meals on Wheels, about providing nutrition to people and then having social programs to try and connect people, why not try and connect the 2 things together, where you actually provide a meal and also provide some social connectivity for our elderly residents in the city of Darebin. So that's what this particular pilot project endeavours to do. It's not just about providing nutrition, which is very, very important for our ageing community, but nutrition also, there's social nutrition that we have to consider. That is people getting together over a meal and actually feeling that they are still part of the community and taking part in the life of the city. Also, the other aspect I think that has to be highlighted out of this, and we've mentioned this along the way in the development of this project, is the economic benefits for our city. It's always struck me as the most obvious thing is that we have a very diverse community in our city, and also we have a very diverse food choice in our city in terms of the many restaurants that we have from different ethnic cuisines. So putting those 2 things together, it just makes practical sense, and it actually can provide a bit of economic benefit to many of our restaurants and cafes in our city. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what the outcome of the pilot is, because I think that once we get the results back from this pilot, I think it's got enormous potential to grow into something even bigger than what is being proposed there. But let's take easy steps at the beginning, and then see what comes back from the pilot, and hopefully we can grow the project into something bigger and better. Mr Acting Mayor.
Okay. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence, if you've got a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. While we've got inclusion of Thai restaurants, I'm just aware there's about 6 Indian restaurants in central
Yes.
Reservoir, and
Yes.
it is a cheap source of vegetarian food.
Yes. I'm happy. Can we just include Indian restaurants, if that's okay?
There is
Order, councillors, come to order, please.
I'm just going to ask through you. I'm just going to get some clarity in relation to point 4. My reading of point 4 is simply council engaging with other restaurants in regards to increasing the diversity of food options.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm just conscious about council starting to name particular restaurants,
Yes.
which I think is problematic, and I think also naming a whole range of cuisines. I think if we don't have a clear understanding of what we mean by cultural diversity, then we've got an entirely different problem on our hands. I would just ask whether the mover and seconder might consider actually not mentioning any types of restaurants and just actually, it's the principle. If I can just propose that as an amendment.
May I respond to that? I'm happy to. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I'm happy to do that. I suppose when I wrote it, I was actually visualising the venues that are there. So you know, and ones that will work. So I take Councillor McCarthy's point. I didn't mean to exclude any particular cuisine. That is certainly not my intention.
Is that acceptable to the seconder?
Just to show, you know, due respect, happy to just provide greater cultural diversity. But I also wanted to ensure that there was appropriate...
And that's acceptable to the seconder?
Yeah, as long as it's understood, Mr. Acting Mayor, that, you know, there are some that are probably more suitable than others because of availability.
Sure.
Yeah, so that the officers know exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
All right. Okay. Look, if there's no further debate, I'm going to propose to put that to vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously again. And 8.5, revised aged and disability department fees, HAC services. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I want to move the motion, but with a spirit statement addition, which is for the council to receive an update or briefing on the changes of those fees and structures on the 2015-16 budget.
Okay, and so moved Councillor Lee, seconded.
Happy to second that.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence too. Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. As the report outlines, this changes to fees and charges for our aged and disability services came out as recent changes to the Commonwealth legislation funding model in relation to our HAC services, and also because of the funding arrangement between the state and the Commonwealth, and therefore to a lesser extent to council as well, it has this is a downstream effect of what's been caught up in the Commonwealth negotiations and the fees and charges. Now that we're a bit clearer as to what's happening with at the Commonwealth level, we do actually need to readjust our fees. We have looked at the fees. They are reasonably modest, you know, in the order of about $1 per hour per customer, from what the report is telling us. But I am keen. I know there will be minimal impact, but I wouldn't mind just getting an update or a briefing. It certainly does not require a full-on briefing paper unless the impact of the budget is significant. But I would like to know just at what stage does that affect our budget due to the forces that are beyond our control, i.e. the fees and determination that's happening at the Commonwealth and the state levels. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Lawrence.
Nothing further to add. Councillor Lee's covered all the issues there.
Mr. Acting Mayor, I just want to point out, just for the benefit of
Councillor Greco.
Councillors, that even though there has been a fee adjustment, it's important to note that in the report that that there has been a reimbursement to our pensioners in relation to them paying higher fees for this past month. So it's important that we note that, that there has been reimbursement, or that reimbursement is currently in course to ensure that they are fully compensated.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Greco. If there are no further speakers, I'm going to put that to a vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously again. 8.6.
Happy to second.
Moved Councillor Wee, seconded Councillor McCarthy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor and Councillor McCarthy. This report came out of a GB item I put forward to the Council, which is essentially to look at healthier food options at our leisure centres. And can I start by congratulating the officer that prepared the report. I thought it was a very well thought out report and well researched. For the Council's benefit and those in the public gallery, we'll note that Darebin, despite having the fresh food market just literally across the road, almost 50% of our population did not have sufficient intake of fresh fruit and vegetables in 2012. And about a third of our children between 2 to 16-year-olds are either considered overweight or obese. And about a third of us adults do not undertake sufficient physical activity, and I probably count myself into that 1/3 category as well. But I stopped spiking as much as I should. Notwithstanding all of that, I think, as our officers correctly identified, leisure centre is a great place to promote some of the healthy eating messages that we have, and the fact that it presents an opportunity for Council to work with our leisure centre operators and our community to promote the healthy eating message and the gradual reduction of junk food in those areas. But we're not going to do this in a hard-hitting way. We engage through an action-based research way, and that is to engage with the key stakeholders, gather the evidence, do a pilot at the 3 key sites of Bundoora, Homestead, and the 2 leisure centres in Reservoir and Northcote. And then, depending on the feedback of that, look at other ways and options, such as incorporating some of the healthy eating options into the lease agreements. So it is certainly a softer approach, but it also works by engaging the stakeholders. So we're not forcing this issue on consumers, and also we're not forcing this issue on the operators. So I'm confident that we'll get some indication back from the pilot as to what the next steps are. So I'm eagerly awaiting for the report and the pilot results. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor Councillor McCarthy.
Just in the interest of time, I'm happy to withhold my speaking rights for the moment.
Councillor Bilala.
Yeah, I do wish to speak on this. Thank you, Mr.
Speaking for or against?
For. I'm speaking for. I just when I read this, and of course I totally support it, and I thank Councillor Lee for pursuing this. I just find it kind of incongruous that we have to have a policy around this for leisure centres. It's kind of odd. You go to the Reservoir Leisure Centre, I spend an hour there trying to get fit, and you know, I come out of there exhausted. And we all know, I think, as adults, pretty much what's good, what's not good to eat, you know, generally speaking. And then you go to the counter, and there are the big cookies with the Smarties that they're selling, you know, and chocolates. And now, it seems to me odd and long overdue to need to have a policy to look at healthy eating options at leisure centres. I can understand if it's not managed by council, where you might have to put it in the contract, but Reservoir Leisure Centre that's managed by council, and we sell junk food at the leisure centre, and we have to go through this process of you know, changing, we have to change in the range and type of food that is provided, changing behaviour of consumers and centre staff. I don't think it's going to require, it shouldn't require massive behavioural changes. We know that chocolate is not that great, and cookies with Smarties shouldn't, you know, not a good look when you're at the counter there at the leisure centre. So, whilst I support it, I do think that there's a bit of a, I don't know, maybe a bit of a sorry day situation happened in here. This is something that should not cost $9,000 to implement, because to me it's a no-brainer. And I think it's disappointing that it's come to this. We've got so many policies on, you know, eating healthy and this, that and the other, and yet, and we go to a leisure centre and we can buy junk food, and kids can buy junk food. I just think I wanted to mention that because I think it's kind of embarrassing. However, be that as it may, I think it's a step in the right direction. Just one other thing, the report does talk about financial assessment, and that maybe if we, the possibility of making more, you know, just more interesting food, quite frankly, more interesting food, a broader range of food, it might increase the revenue. But I'm glad that it mentions that, because at the Reservoir Leisure Centre, it's a real meeting spot for a lot of people, and it would be great to sit down and have a cup of coffee if there was space for it and if it looked inviting. But if you sit down and you're sweating because you get all the sweat from the swimming pool and it's not, and it's not actually right. What my point is, there is potential to increase revenue, and maybe through this review, we might get some really good ideas how that can happen. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Councillor Williams.
I'm speaking for it. However, I do want to suggest that yes, it'd be great to have some options at any of these venues. I do also believe that it's actually in the hands of a parent. It's a parent that actually pays for these items. I mean, my children, we eat healthily at home, but when we do go out, I see it as an outing. Whether you go into the cinemas, we do buy the popcorn, and the same when we go to swimming, we do buy the chips, because our children do not get it at home. So when we go on an outing, it's like a special event, a special time, and my children tend to like to have obviously to snack on those type of things rather than have a sandwich. Now, in reference to healthy foods and things like that, those who usually work at the gym tends to go home and eat healthy. They don't tend to purchase the product that's actually there. So I'm a little concerned that putting all this good work of healthy food, who's actually going to buy it? Healthy food has a due by date which is a lot quicker than your junk food. I do agree that maybe yes, we do need to have some sort of option, but we've got to be really careful here, because it's the parents at the end of the day that actually pays for this food, and it's up to them to say yes or no for that child to have that food or not.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. If there are no any further speakers, okay then. What I have some remarks that I'm going to make on this. Councillors have all made some valid points, but I don't support this. And I agree with Councillor Williams that it should be in the hands of parents, and it is their responsibility. And I don't think this is our role, and I do think this is somewhat of a nanny statist proposal, and I don't support, and I don't support it for that reason. Could I?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Does that mean I get a right reply?
No, I don't think it does, because it's concluding marks. I'm going. You do get a right of reply. In
the interest of time, I think I'll just bypass that. Thank you.
Okay then. Okay. So all those in favour. All those against.
I will call for a division vote, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour. I name Councillor Fontana, Councillor Williams, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Lee, Councillor Boella, Councillor Greco, and Councillor Lawrence. And in opposition, I name myself. 8.7.
Happy to move it. Hang on, sorry, what was that, Mr. Acting Mayor?
8.7.
8.7, we have a decision to make here.
Happy to move that, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Move
Oh,
what?
sorry. Of course, number 1.
I'm happy to second, but I had a very slight amendment as well.
Yes, I've got one too.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You want to hear mine first, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Which is basically for council to receive an
Yes,
update or
that was mine.
update or briefing on how we deal with similar situations, whether we need to revise the advisory committee terms of reference, because they're silent on that at the moment.
I actually had a different one, sorry.
Oh, you had
I had
a different
a
one.
slightly
My
different, sorry. I'm happy, yeah. That Ray Kingsbury provide a report on the forum to the Women's Committee. And Council. And Council.
Okay.
Sorry, did I send that through? I don't think I did. Apologies for that. Provide a report on the forum to the Women's Committee and Council.
Is that written or verbal?
Written, please.
Okay. And are there? Would you like to speak?
Look, just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. This is a sort of not a normal request, but when you consider that Ray is the convener of the Women's Committee, and she does not have access to organisational professional development that would be accessible to other officers who might oversee the various committees. I think it's important, and her role as convener is voluntary. I think that it's important that we support whoever the convener is in access to professional development, and it seems that the local government the LG Pro Women's Professional Development Forum, if there is to be professional development made available, this seems to be the most appropriate and probably the most valuable to her role. And let's not forget, Mr. Acting Mayor, that professional development is something that is an investment for an organisation. If it's targeted and useful. So yes, prepared to support Ray in this request, but Ray will give back to the committee and hence to the community by way of the intelligence gathered at the forum. Hence the request for a report. I think it's important that we all benefit from that experience. Also, I welcome Councillor Lee's additional point, because we need to have this discussion and make sure that if we need to update the council advisory committee's terms of reference, because it's silent on this. But I think it's just appropriate that we extend the PD to the convener of the Women's Committee, and this seems like a very appropriate one. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Councillor Lee.
I have nothing further to add. I think Councillor Bella has covered all the points. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further speakers?
Just a question, if I can. I'm supportive of the additional points. I think they help provide some clarity. But I just wanted to ask whether council still has I don't have the budget in front of me. Still has a budget line for our advisory committees, which we did have a couple of budgets ago in relation to supporting the initiation of research and other things. There was I think it was a once-off allocation to support the work of the different committees. Maybe we can get some clarity.
I believe we don't, but if I could call on the CEO and Abedal and but for the CEO Miss Knox, if she could provide. Mr. Hamilton.
Ms. Knox.
Thank you.
Mr. Active, I just need a clarification, if I may. I'm just wondering whether it's appropriate for council to actually allocate money to an individual, or rather it's more appropriate to allocate the money to the Darebin Women's Advisory Committee, and then the Advisory Committee to, if you like, endorse for the convener to attend, because I think that would be a more appropriate way to follow. So just if I could get some advice on that.
That's Mr. Hamilton, do you have anything further to add?
Nothing I can add at this point without being across the specifics of the committees in terms of reference to their makeup, unless Director Ms. Knox has anything further to add.
But that may well also be, Councillor Greco, that may well be an amendment.
Yeah.
If I could
I'm
add,
thinking of putting an amendment forward. Yeah.
if I could add, I think Councillor Greco does have a point there, but it may not be practical in light of the comment on the bottom of page 37 where the actual networking event's on the 30th of July. It's, 10 days away, so you may not be able to go back to the Women's Committee. But I think we actually need to consider that, to actually go to the committee or group or the venture and decide amongst themselves. But on this occasion, I think we probably need to move on, seeing it's very close to the end of the month for it to happen.
Just a further point, if I may, Mr. Acting Mayor, I think both Councillor Greco and Fontana make a really good point, but the timeline is an issue. Maybe it's something that needs to be considered in point 2 in terms of how the monies is allocated. If this happens again, or if we review the terms of reference, whether the process maybe needs to be included as to how it's decided. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay. Do we have any further speakers? If not, do you have an amendment, Councillor Greco?
Look, I just want councillors to consider this amendment. I'll put an amendment forward.
Yep.
That council agreed to provide financial support to the Darebin Advisory Committee to attend the 2015 LGBT Professional Development Forum and network dinner at the cost of $640.
I'm sorry, Mr. Acting Mayor, as a mover, I can't accept that amendment because it's just not practicable in terms of the timeline. I accept the sentiment, and as I said, I think it's a process how we do this, and I think because of the time constraint, it's just not practical to do that. How would we do that if we don't meet as a Women's Committee and determine the process? So I just think it's just not practical. Unless someone has a...
Could I just have a different rewording that may help Councillor Villella's thing? That the council agreed to provide financial support to the Darebin Advisory Committee for the convener to attend. The 2015 LGBTI Women's Professional Development Forum and network dinner at a cost of $640. I think it's important that, that's the amendment.
Can I just make a point that the next Darebin Women's Advisory Committee is actually in 2 nights' time, on Wednesday the 22nd of July.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well then...
Miss Stevens, if you would care to invite any council.
Through you, Mr Acting Chair. I believe that Ray Kingsbury made a specific request for Council to make a decision because it's not a normal practice that Council would pay for members or officers outside of Council to attend such forums. So it's not a normal practice for Council. The amendment that Councillor Greco is proposing could possibly fit into point 1 because it also maintains the direct request that Ray Kingsbury has made.
Yeah. Okay.
So can I read it out again? So that Council agreed to provide financial support to the Darebin Women's Advisory Committee for the convener to attend the 2015 LGB Pro Women's Professional Development Forum and network dinner at a cost of $640.
Yep.
Happy to second
Part
that.
3 needs to be read. Part 3 needs to be changed.
Why?
Because we changed the name of the
So
that the convener provides.
the convener provides.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so if we can just change point 3 to say the convener provide a written report. Something missing from point 1.
Yeah.
Financial assistance.
Yeah.
Through Mr Acting Chair, I think financial support mimics the previous one.
Financial support.
Okay. And women's has an apostrophe S.
Yep, okay. How does that seem to councillors?
Yep.
Okay, look, can I put, is there any further debate or can we put it to a vote?
Put it to vote.
Okay, put it to a vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. I'll now move on to item 8.8.
Happy to move, Mr Acting Chair.
That's moved, Councillor Fontana, seconded. Do I have a seconder?
Mr Mayor, I'll second it, but I do have a question.
Okay, I'll put you as the seconder then, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lawrence, can you ask your question?
In regards to this motion, I'm just wondering how it intersects with the notice of motion 9.1. To you, Mr Chair.
Mr Hamilton.
Through you, Mr Acting Chair, this notice of motion, this report as presented in 8.8 deals with, I guess, normal statutory processes considered, and all these matters are considered under the old policy, or more correctly, not under the current policy. So there is a separation in that regard to the notice of motion as it's read. which will be considered by council.
So,
okay. Does that answer your question, Councillor Lawrence?
not really. And I just...
I guess, sorry, through Mr. Engineer, to provide clarity, so that the matters presented in 8.8 will be considered under the old previous policy as resolved by council. The new policy does not apply to these matters, and the notice of motion as read relates to the new policy, so there is a separation in the two matters.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, okay, so that moved Councillor Fontana, seconded Councillor Wright. Councillor Fontana.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Acting Chair. Look, we've had a few briefings and additional dialogue from officers in relation to this matter. Look, it's a fairly easy recommendation or simple recommendation where it seeks to commence statutory procedures to give public notice on a range of right-of-way discontinuances, removal of reserve statuses on the site, and also transfer land back to council so we can actually have control of it, and it's very clear here. We're actually considering 6 items here this evening. Hopefully we'll pass them so we can actually meet the requirements of the Act and also of the policy prior to the one that being adopted on May the 18th. And also, it's noted on page 41, recommendation number 1. Note the sale of minor assets policy adopted by Council on the 18th of May 2015 does not apply to these listed matters. These are simply we're simply following a statutory procedure. We're not actually doing anything else except for what's required in the Act and in a previous policy. Now, in the report, we note that some of the proposals include to discontinue the sale of several streets, several roads, both in Reservoir and Northcote. And sometimes we do these individually, but it's been decided to group these to actually probably save time or just to move on with the process, but it's actually probably taken longer than had we probably done them individually. Council is also proposing in one of the matters here to reacquire a right-of-way between Westgarth and Bow Street, and it's in our interest to do that. We need to, because quite simply it retains, we actually get to retain ownership of the site so we can actually deal with the interested party in a fair and equitable manner, and unfortunately at this stage it hasn't happened, so it actually needs to come back to us. The proposal for Brook Street also needs to be corrected as it's holding up a planning application, and this can be quite costly for all parties involved. I think the crux of the matter of the report is on the bottom of page 47, where we need to actually commence these statutory procedures to ensure that, that we discontinue some of the reserves mentioned in the report, and also acquire title back to council so we can actually manage it under our jurisdiction. And also on the bottom of page 47 declare one of the items is a public highway. Now, as I mentioned before, we've actually had briefings in relation to these matters before, and these are fairly standard statutory items that we've dealt with for many, many years. We don't get a lot over the course of a term, but when we do, we actually deal with them fairly sensibly and fairly appropriately. But the issue is, I suppose, with some of the matters is adverse possession. It's a complicated situation, adverse possession. Who actually has right? Well, it's implied that council has the right of control and management of right-of-ways where residents believe they have the right to actually acquire and control and manage a piece of land that does not belong to them, or nor have they actually been allowed to. But it just happened over the course of time. What we have to do in light of our policy and the Act is to actually ensure that we manage it, control it, and deal with it in an appropriate manner so we can actually proceed with discontinuance. It's not an easy one, but it's what we've got in front of us that we need to do and how we need to do it, and the policy in place prior to May 18 actually sets out how these are to be dealt with. And I hope councils actually support these, because quite simply we actually need to move on with these and not have them come up again.
Councillor Lawrence.
Nothing to add.
Okay, any further speakers for or against? Okay, I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Okay, that concludes ordinary ordinary business. We do have notices of motion, but it being 9 p.m, I'm going to propose that we take a quick break for as in line with our normal practice.
Health break.
Yes, for health break.
I don't smoke.
Well done. Yes, so I'll call a break, and if we can be back here at just after 9:10.
10-minute break.
There's
There's 5 or a 10-minute break?
5-minute break.
I'm happy to make a 5-minute break.
Yep. 5-minute break.
So I'll be back at 6 past 9?
Yeah.
6 past 9.
Good, how you doing? It's only Saturday night. How'd you go?
Which one? Oh, yeah. Where is it?
Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, that's not. Congratulations.
No, well, I've gone through there. So they've done
Are you late on? Are you late
Just
sometime?
talk about this one, it's going to be a hard one to beat. What they've done is very cunning. They've hidden the ceiling. They made it back up. They made it back and squeezed it. So what it is these officers need to get proper arbitrary support because that's got an impact on the tree. And the other thing is the transport is the main objection which we didn't consider. We had our internal costs and traffic there. So I'm just putting that there. If we're going to win this and figure out, we'll need a really good traffic policy. But this, I'm trying to resolve tonight. No, they've gone through it. It doesn't even say. The farmers looking at the farm issues are negative or positive. You see, at one level, they take a one-sided way. They've got the things. They make something better. Yeah. But overall, the density is there and the traffic issue is still there. And I went up there today and I took the brothers to council so they bounced back. They are putting soil and bitumen on the tree protection zones right now. Yeah, I just don't want to put it. So that's all gone through. That's all gone through Darren. Now the point there is that it doesn't say whether it's negative or positive. It says we just have to report on those things. But this, I'm putting this. Colin Brooks said Matthew Guy should call it in. So I'm putting this on Dick Reed. Because otherwise we're going to go to the So that's it. These are all enabling. And I think Oliver would love to write to Labour and Cabinet. Or half thoughts. That's what we're talking about. Because if you're going to spin it around and get broken, it doesn't happen. So you got to have one or the other. They're trying to do, you know what, they don't do the painting properly. You can't even try to start doing it properly. I got up to Canberra, what a joke. Some people don't even have the top of the feet. They've got concrete, you can stand on grass to shoot it. So I'm just thinking, my son's 3.
You know that. Where the money goes.
Everyone, it being 9:10, we will resume the normal meeting. If people could please resume their seats, that would be much appreciated. So thanks everyone, and we now move on to 9.1, notices of motion. And the first notice of motion is in Councillor Oi's name, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Mr. Akimir, and thank you, Councillor McCarthy. This follows up from the briefing that we've had, and there were questions asked, and there were two particular clauses in the new motion, in the new policy we adopted on the 18th of May, which in retrospect I had some issues with, and I think we need to do some urgent review on. One is the recognition of occupiers' land maintenance upkeep of the land under clause 10.3, which is about the sale price, and the other one is under clause 11.3, and this is what worries me as well, is the council now has the ability to so-called self-help, to remove obstructions and reinstate boundary fences and charge the occupiers under the new policy. The difficulty I have with that is that quite often a lot of these laneways and disused right-of-ways have been occupied, and the ownership remains uncertain, and the occupier in good faith has decided to look after the land, maintain the land, and because they under the new process, there might be, slim as it may be, there may be that situation where council may actually go in after failure by the occupier to purchase the land or failure by the occupier to purchase the land for the council to move in and remove the boundary fence and charge the occupiers for the privilege. And I think there are some issues of equity there that we do not want to inadvertently trespass on people's land, but also be in a situation whereby people who have been council land or occupying the land have been not only been disadvantaged, but also have a reasonably heavy-handed approach, in my opinion, in this self-help recourse. So what I really wanted to do is to look at whether those two clauses can be modified or changed under the new policy. I know that the policy is scheduled to be reviewed in 2017, but I think because of those two particular clauses, I think they warrant some urgent action. And the other part of my notice of motion is really to look at whether we can halt any of the progresses that's going to be started under the 18th of May policy while those two clauses are being urgently reviewed. So as we heard earlier in the item 8.8, our officers have presented the statutory process for the 6 properties that were started under the old process. So just to be clear, we're not going back to the old process, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're simply looking at the two particular clauses in there which I have some issues with, and to bring them back as an urgent matter of review to see whether or not these can be amended to ensure that our elderly residents in particular and pensioners are not disadvantaged through the adoption of the new policy. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Councillor McCarthy.
I'll withhold my seconding speaking rights for the moment, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Any other speakers for or against?
I've just got a question. In relation to point 2, just through you, Mr. Acting Chair, in seeking legal opinion of impacts on halting any matters currently under consideration, as I'm reading that, this is not halting the policy at present. We're not going to go into a status of no policy. I just want to get clarification on that, because I think what was said verbally then and what's written is, I'm getting two messages on that.
Mr. Hamilton or Ms. Stevens.
Through you, Mr. Acting Chair, the policy is endorsed and is in effect being implemented by officers. So until such time as a new policy is endorsed, that policy will stay in play. And the matters under that policy, I guess the wording in point 2 is to seek legal opinion on halting any matters under that policy for the That provides any clarity.
Okay. Do I have any other speakers for or against?
Look, I'm going to speak against this for a reason or two, Mr. Acting Chair. I'm just concerned about some of the comments in relation to occupier of the site, that they've actually done it in good faith, but they actually need to demonstrate they've actually had legal, I suppose, permission from either council, who, as I understand, we're the implied guardians of right-of-ways and other parcels of land, which is actually in the Act. Or you can go further back, Mr. Acting Chair, and actually try to find out the original subdivider of the area or the site or the location and contact him or his descendants to see if there's any legal claim that they may have. And I understand that to be the case too. So in actual fact, you can't actually occupy right-of-ways or parcels of land which are implied under council's jurisdiction under the Act. So these are a little bit, I suppose, tricky or unnecessary, as we've got a policy that's in line with the Act on how we actually manage and regulate the discontinuance and sale of right-of-way. So this pretty much gives a free parcel of land, which is under council's jurisdiction to someone, because they can say they've had adverse possession. Well, what is this adverse possession? Where is the permission granted to them by either an authority or a council or another entity to say, yes, you can acquire this free of charge? No, I can't sit with that. It's an actual asset or property which is owned by council on behalf of the community. And I'm assuring, I think the committee will expect us to actually deal with the matter appropriately and fairly, not to just bequeath something to someone because of that adverse position. And as we know, you really haven't got legal title to that. And a property title or a plan of subdivision will identify that you have no right. You may have an implied access to it, but to actually attain the property under adverse position can't happen, Mr. Acting Chair.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers for or against?
I'd like to move an amendment.
Yep. Councillor Lawrence, what is your amendment?
My amendment's fairly straightforward. Sorry that I haven't provided it, but is to delete item 2 and include in its place simply the words community consultation in relation to any potential changes to the policy.
That is not accepted because I've moved a similar motion in the past and I was advised by officers not to proceed on that path.
That's not acceptable to the mover, so you can either withdraw it or you can put your amendment. So you can ask that your amendment be voted on by the...
No, I only have a mover, I don't have a second.
Do you have a seconder for that? Sorry, do we have a seconder for the amendment?
So you're asking if there's a seconder to the amendment?
Yes.
So it needs to be another councillor?
Yeah. Okay, but for wax of a seconder, the motion is as is. Can I call Councillor McCarthy?
I'll take up my seconding rights now, if I may, Mr. Acting Mayor, if there's no one else rushing to speak. I want to acknowledge the work that Councillor Lee's put into this, because I think he's struck the balance between I think his noted dissatisfaction with the policy as recently adopted, not because the intent is wrong, but because the unintended consequences could be not in keeping with what we might consider the values of this council and how we want to do business. And I think what Councillor Lee has put forward is quite a reasonable request, and it's just to look at the potential to review a couple of the points that are listed in the new policy that has been adopted. They are matters which I think, when you look at the rollout of this policy, potentially, without the appropriate sensitivity, could result in quite a traumatising experience for some residents. And I think this is where what Councillor Lee's put forward is to say, let's have a look at this and let's see if we can do this in a different way, and hence the reference to rewording our policy and reconsideration of some of those key elements. And I just want to draw Council's attention to what those elements might be. And I suppose I pose the question, do we feel comfortable with the prospect of Council spending quite a lot of money on lawyers to enforce a new fence boundary or a revised fence boundary based on a historical situation whereby the Council achieves its legal outcome and then steps in, takes down a fence and then re-establishes a new boundary, and the residents in some cases are non-English speaking background, they are elderly, they have occupied and maintained a piece of land, it might be a vegetable garden, it might have all sorts of things planted in it, and through a legal process, Council pushes the property boundary back for what they consider has been their land. Right or wrong, legal, I would take Councillor Fontana's point. This is about trying to inject a different set of sensitivity to the situation and some reconsideration of how we value what the connection to those pieces of land actually is. I'm not sold on the idea that this is the right policy or the wrong policy. What I am sold on is that concern that Councillor Lee has expressed, which is that we need to look at this and think about how this will actually roll out once it starts to be implemented. And hence, I think this is quite a moderate request to actually have a review in relation to those 2 points. I think it doesn't do what Councillor Lee first sought to do, which is kind of really look at the whole policy from root and branch. I think this is actually a really reasonable way forward, and it picks up on those 2 issues which have had some community concern expressed to us already. I am disappointed that we have a policy here which I don't think has gone through the consultation processes. I take Councillor Lawrence's point about consultation, but there has been officer advice to the contrary, and I think we need to take that on board given the sensitivities we've got here. So I would just ask councillors to consider this is quite a moderate way forward to soften some of the issues, and I'll end it there. Thank you.
Councillor Viola.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I want to speak in favour of the notice of motion. I mean, I've said it before in the chamber. I don't have a problem with the old policy, but because I think what the new policy had, it just went to the other extreme, and I think what to me it had. I know that the new policy was underpinned by working in council's interest, in the interest of council in inverted commas. That was made clear to us. That was the overriding guiding principle. But I question the interpretation of in council's interest. I think the 2 points that Councillor Lee has sought to address and review is really humanises the whole policy. I thought, as it stands, it's just more like council acts as like a corporate entity rather than a tier of government that represents a local community, and should be mindful of that, because what it goes to, Mr Acting Mayor, is that unintended consequences, as Councillor McCarthy said. I think we have to be really sensitive to the people's connection with the land. And there was an example cited where, you know, a resident had a fig tree and had that piece of land for a long time. Now, there's a cultural bias there. If we just dismiss the fig tree, that was the example cited to us, if we dismiss the fig tree as irrelevant and therefore, you know, it should go in the market for the highest bidder. I think we've got to be really careful, because there is that real human connection. And I've got to tell you, Mr Acting Mayor, as someone from an Italian background, a fig tree is of significance. And I say that seriously. And they're nurtured, and it takes a long time to bear fruit. So you go in there and you ridicule and you dismiss that connection. I think we've got to be very, very careful. That's just one example, but I'm sure there will be many more unless we ensure that we've got a fair and reasonable policy that looks at the interests of all, but above all, Mr Acting Mayor, that we remember who we are, and that we are a council, and that we need to ensure that we have the human face in our policies, and this is a very important one. And what Councillor Lee has identified are two elements that, if we don't tread cautiously and with sensitivity, whether it be culturally, financially, whatever, there will be, you know, us acting in a way that goes against our very values as an organisation. So I welcome the diligence that Councillor Lee has applied to this policy in reviewing it and making what I think are constructive recommendations just to get the balance right. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm just seeking more clarification because, one, I don't have the policy in front of me and I've got these clauses noted here, but does the word recognition of occupiers' maintenance and upkeep, are we referring to first preference selling to occupants, or are we referring to discounts for occupants?
It's discounts.
Occupiers, because these are two issues that were debated, but I can't unpack the motion. I don't quite understand what's in the motion.
I just want to clarify in reference to that fig tree. That lady was offered at the laneway for $2,000, where she didn't want to pay for it because she'd had looked after it for 45 years, and there was a purchaser who'd purchased behind her, and they put an offer in, and as I said, she was given all sorts of discounts, but on top of that she was also given that whether she could have part payment or have up to something like 6 years to pay it back. So it wasn't just a highest bidder in that reference. I just want to make that clarify that.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. I appreciate that, but my response was basically in the way that it was determined that a fig tree was not something that could be valued, and that was the issue, not the outcome.
Yeah, it's just that we have journalists here that probably reported in the wrong way that we sell it to the highest bidder, and I don't want that to be
Well, I didn't
reported.
suggest that we did sell it to the highest bidder.
It's
just
order, everyone, all councillors will resume their seats. I would like to, do you have any other, in terms of the answers to those questions, is there anything that you can add, Mr. Hamilton?
No, happy to answer any questions on the policy itself, but there's nothing I can add in regards to the notice of motions you presented.
Do we have any other further Councillor Greco, do you wish to speak? We are running out of time, so I'd ask you to...
Yeah, look, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion that's been put. At the outset, I'd just like to say I would have liked to have supported Councillor Lawrence's amendment about consultation, but it's unfortunate that given the advice that we've had from our officers, from what I understand Councillor Lee said, that we cannot incorporate that in the motion, which is unfortunate. But that's the very point that I want to speak to. I don't want to cover already what's been said by the other speakers, but to me what's important here is the consultation part. And why that's important is that in the policy, in the new policy that's been developed, as we've found out, that it was developed without any community consultation. It was developed by our officers in relation to talking to various departments within the council, and also some external bodies in terms of putting forward a policy. And I think because of that, that concerns me a lot in relation to that we didn't actually hear the voice of the community on something that we're going to find over the next few years that is going to impact on quite a few people, and we're going to sort of cop, if you like, the consequences of what the new policy is. So just on that basis, because I was sort of two minds about this, and I understand, as was mentioned before, the intent of the new policy in terms of closing off certain gaps, and that's great. But I think just on the basis that we have not had a proper consultation, I think it merits that we have an obligation to have a re-look at this policy, particularly in line with the two salient points that Councillor Lee has raised, and like that we can actually put the policy to bed once and for all, having satisfied ourselves that we did not have a consultation process, but at least Council had a re-look at it, a re-examination of it, before we actually put it into place. So I ask councillors that let's go through this process. It could be a short, sharp process, because we know what the again, what the salient points are. Let's unpack them. Let's come up with some sort of conclusion around that. It could be that the new policy is the only way that we can go, or it could be that we may be able to modify it to actually accommodate some of the concerns that have been expressed.
I just have a question.
Yeah, Councillor Williams.
But look, the process does actually meets the requirement of the Act. I just want to unpack exactly what consultation are you talking about. I mean, is this like a planning scheme act that we go out to consultation and we invite the whole community to write their own rules in how they want to do right away and how they purchase it?
Mr Chair, point of order. Councillors are
think
debating an amendment they refused for me to put. You can't debate community consultation. You didn't take the amendment.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Greco. I'm going to ask...
Close minds.
Thank you, Councillor Williams and Councillor Lawrence. I'm going to invite Mr. Hamilton to outline the consultation.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Acting Chair. During the development of the current policy as adopted by Council, it was determined through the Equity and Inclusion Planning Tool, the EPAT tool, that the process undertaken around consultation and the data available at the time was sufficient to satisfy the requirements of Council's community engagement policy and framework. Just as a point of clarification.
So it already has.
Just if I can just get a point of clarity through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, because this is the key question. If I'm correct in the advice I've just heard, Council's determination at the officer level through the equity and impact tool was that consultation, further consultation wouldn't be appropriate or wouldn't be required, if I can just understand. Do we have any further reasons as to why? Because that's maybe a critical point here.
Yep. I guess through Mr. Acting Chair, just for further clarification, as mentioned, through the EPAT2 assessment, it was determined that from the data, the consultation data available and the proposed changes to the policy, that sufficient consultation was undertaken relative to the new policy, and that was determined in accordance with our own EPAT tool.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Can I ask, how are we in line with other municipalities regarding right-of-ways?
Through Mr. Acting Chair, we are very consistent in the way we consult around these matters, and I guess our commitment is to provide adequate community consultation at all times. So, and hence the EPAT tools in play for that very process, as is our engagement policy and framework, and we've been seen to meet both of those.
Okay, thank you. Look, we've had considerable debate on this, so if there are no further speakers, I'm going to close.
Assert my right.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I start by saying thank you, Councillor Lawrence, for suggesting a community consultation framework, because that's exactly what I suggested initially. But as we heard from our officers, it was determined at officer level that we have that consultation work wasn't necessary as determined under our current EPAT tool. So I too find that response not wholly satisfactory, but I will stick to the advice from our officers and not to go down that path. So that's the reason why I could not accept your appointment, your amendment, because that was originally the intent of my original draft notice of motion, but it was since has been revised to what you see on the screen in front of you. Speaking on the notice of motion, I think whenever we develop policy, we've got to strike the right balance, and I think that's the point that Councillor Valella made, to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences in the policy, particularly where those unintended consequences go to the heart and the value of our council, which is equity and inclusion. So when you do look at some of the two issues that are highlighted there in terms of self-help and not being recognised for people's recognition for their upkeep of the land, we're not talking about giving the land away. Nowhere in that notice of motion says we're giving land away. What we are saying is that because the ownership of the land is under question, because people have actually looked after the land without knowing who the actual owner is of that land, and because they are, in a way, providing a community benefit on behalf of the council, shouldn't the council have some way of recognising that? That's the first point. The second point, which is exactly what Councillor McCarthy said, we would want to be in a situation where council want to use lawyers against its own residents.
Councillor, where you cannot, I refer you to our governance work law, and which you cannot introduce a new matter into the right of reply.
I'm sorry, I don't think I was introducing any new matters.
Okay. Can I? Okay. In that case, look, I'm going to put it to the. Sorry for any misunderstanding. You've got 20 seconds.
Thank you. I'll use up that 15. So I don't want to be in a situation where council uses lawyers against its own residents, because that does not compute with our value as a council, and I'll leave it at there.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's a tied vote. As it's a tied vote, I'm in a situation I've never been in before, but I'm going to have to use my casting vote. I'm going to vote against to maintain the current, which would essentially maintain the current status quo.
Division, please, Mr. Acting.
Okay, I'll call a division. All those in favour? I name Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Lee, Councillor Valella, and Councillor Greco. And against? I name myself, Councillor Fontana, Councillor Williams and Councillor Lawrence. So that is lost. 9.2. 9.2 submission to VCAT in the name of regarding 191 20 Road Bundoora in the name of Councillor Lawrence.
Oh, happy to second it.
Councillor Lawrence.
Just through you, how long have I got on this?
Up 3 minutes. 5 minutes. 5.
Okay. Yes, councillor. Some councillors be quite aware of this proposal and the history of it in terms of a piece of land that juts into Bundoora Park on the corner of Snake Gully Drive and Plenty Road at 1091 Plenty Road. And it started its incarnation as quite a harsh application, and they even got up to 11 stories. And council refused it in 2011, went on to VCAT hearings, very complicated hearings where amended plans were substantially amended and resubmitted, and residents went there for many weeks, I think it was, in terms of fighting this proposal. In the end, VCAT made a decision that the 474 unit proposal should be 361 units. And since then the block has been resold, a developer flipped, as they say, and a developer has bought and now put in amended plans to VCAT, as VCAT is now the planning authority. So council, this isn't a permit coming to council, but council will be asked as one of the original objectors to submit to this amendment process. Now the amendment process, there are plans, I have got them circulated to councils, I believe officers have. Otherwise, the only residents who've got them, as have been noted in the gallery, people who were registered parties to the previous hearing. The site, it supersises the site, actually adds 70 units and 86 car spaces, but it's fundamentally working within the building envelope that council opposed, but VCAT approved. So a building envelope there. There is some minor variations, and there is also changes to the car parking. So this motion seeks to do 3 things, enable officers and ourselves to do 3 things for our community. One is simply that the officers will be preparing the technical responses to this. So that's in item 1, as we noticed. In part 2, that officers prepare that submission, and the council is notary and obviously empowering council to use internal resources and any required external resources in relation to new amendment process. The new amendment process won't revisit the substantive 361 units. It will visit the impact of the 70 new units and the changed design. There's many subtleties to the change of the design. There's wind issues, there's all sorts of design issues, there's internal amenity issues because the previous buildings that were separated and had air going down them have been filled in. So there's actually some amenity and light and borrowed light, other issues, a lot of issues. Now, this motion doesn't seek to judge all those planning issues here, but simply to forward that to the officers. And one of the key objections the council held against this project, through its many variations in VCAT, was its impact on traffic in the area, because Plenty Road is a very busy road, and we have 2 isolated residential areas that rely on that one intersection. And as ward councillors know, there's many accidents there on that intersection. So this, in the past, we may need to, obviously council may need to review what experts we get in to assess those specific issues that we can object to on the amendment. A third part of this motion also follows up a point made by the member for Bundoora at the original point of this application, Mr Colin Brooks, MP, that Matthew Guy, as the Planning Minister and as a Northern Suburbs Upper House person, could have taken some steps, as this is a state significant site. It's a $1 billion project of over 400 units sitting on a 180 hectare park, which is the largest regional park in the northern suburbs. a substantial park in Melbourne, a home to remnant red gum forests, some of which are over 400 years old. So we've got some majestic things there. I would still say even the VCAT ignored the health of those trees, and their tree protection is inadequate in that they are recommending a 3-storey basement car park immediately above some very large red gums, which will deny them underground water. And again, that's where something, I don't think there's been enough expertise applied to the impacts on our park in this area. And now, we have also, I'll just sum up, there are obviously other issues which the Minister should take an interest in, is to stamp on this. He can put in an independent panel himself, and with the proper experts, to also consider the internal amenity of these units.
Okay. The second, Councillor Greco. If you haven't got anything further to add, I would appreciate giving me time if we could move on.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I'd like to speak.
Okay, then Councillor Greco.
Yeah. I'd like to also move an amendment to Councillor Lawrence's notice of motion, and that's to add an additional 4th point, which reads as follows: that as a matter of courtesy, Council write to all original objectors advising them of Council's intention to lodge a submission with VCAT.
Yes, excellent. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So that point's acceptable to me.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Acting Mayor, if I may speak to this. Look, this is a big issue for the northern part of the city. As Councillor Lawrence pointed out, he sketched out the history of it, and I think it's important that we maintain a very vigilant role in regards to what's currently being proposed in regards to expanding this particular project. As we know in the past, it created a lot of community angst, and we had to work within the constraints that we had at the time in terms of trying to change the proposal to a more acceptable proposal. As we know, and we discussed this earlier, there's a lot of limitations on what Council could do, but I think that the result that Council was able to achieve, even though it was not very satisfactory, but we were able to contain it to what it was with a lot of slight improvements. And it's not that we were happy, but that's what VCAT decided. Now, as we see, there's another attempt to actually almost go back to the original proposal, which is sort of a way of creeping up, if you like, the project. And I think that as a council, and I thank Councillor Lawrence for bringing this to our attention, that we need to put in a submission with VCAT to make our intentions clear as a council in relation to this particular project. Just specifically in relation to the amendment that I've put in there as point 4, I think that it's important that we actually advise the 600 plus, it's almost 700 objectors, which was almost a record.
30 seconds.
Yeah, almost a record. I think I have 3 minutes, Mr. Mayor. Yes?
Yep.
Yeah, so I've got about a minute left, I believe. Yeah.
No, you haven't. You've got about, you've had 30 seconds.
Okay, I'll just, so I think it's important that we advise the previous objectors, just to tell them where we're at with this proposal. It hasn't gone away, and that the council's been vigilant, and that we keep them informed of the progress of what's taken place. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
All right, right on time.
Mr. Acting Mayor, I'd like to propose one additional point which the takers should have on screen. And I can read it out. Basically, it is that this it would be to point 3, the additional words. This letter should be forwarded to the member for Bundoora.
Yes, yes.
And to the 5 upper house members for Northern Metropolitan Region, seeking their support for Council's request to the Minister. So I propose that to the mover and seconder if they're happy to accept that.
750,000 visitors there, so.
And if I could just very quickly speak.
Yes, very happy to accept that.
And I think, thank you, mover and seconder, and I think it's critical here to keep in mind that Council's best chance of achieving an outcome as is described is, I believe, in fact, at this stage in the game, probably through such intervention, and it's rare for me to suggest or support the idea of the Minister intervening or calling in an application in this way, but this is really critical, and to make it critical we actually need to make it an issue for those people who have an interest, a direct interest in what takes place here. And I think that's the relevance of this situation, is that this is outside of Council's hands. It is going to VCAT. It is certainly potentially in the hands of the Minister. And I know the member for Bundoora has been quite interested in this issue. It is his seat, but it's also an issue of interest more broadly, more regionally, and we have a very diverse upper house. We have representation, I think, 4 different political parties and a range of views and interests, and I think we need everyone on Team Darebin in relation to this, and certainly in relation to Team Bundoora, because the residents have shown their feeling in relation to this application in its first incarnation, and were they to be aware, and as they will be, I think they'll show their feeling once again, and I think it's important that our political representatives in the area to be able to voice their concerns to the Minister and embolden him to take the necessary action on our behalf as well. So I hope that we see that intervention, because it is, I'm afraid to admit, I think our best chance of seeing a reasonable outcome in this situation that is consistent with the community views.
Thank you. If there are no other speakers, I would propose to put that to a vote. All those in favour? And I note that that has been carried. That has been carried unanimously. Before the next notice of motion, I would like to, it being almost 9:50, I would like to propose.
Happy to extend for another half an hour.
Yep. Moved Councillor Williams, and that's seconded Councillor Lee. All those in favour? And that's carried. So we're now extended until half an hour. 9.3 in the name of Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lawrence.
We've got a second.
Second.
Okay, sorry. You do. Sorry. I'm going to have to remove that seconding. Because you need to amend this before there can be a seconder.
I'm talking about the amending the word February to March.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So
Okay.
it's factually correct?
All right. Okay. Okay. So do I have a move, Councillor? And can I take Councillor Fontana? Councillor Fontana as seconder. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I've moved this motion because we did have an aspect of this matter come before Council previously in the form of Code of Conduct report back to Council, which we noted. And at the time I did ask some questions because I was confused on what was occurring. I think it's no secret to councillors and also to other people that I'm not a great fan of Code of Conducts. They're another in-house club, and I'm not sure where they go sometimes, and as we've heard, there's thousands and thousands of dollars spent on them. But one of the aspects of this event on the 19th of March that concerned me wasn't the relationships between councillors and the CEO, but it was a relationship collectively between us and our staff, and what ground rules we have in relation to staff industrial matters. And while Council does not set EBA agreements, enterprise agreements directly, indirectly we do set it in terms of setting the council resource plans and the overall objectives on capital works and such. And also, staff do think that councillors have power, and they may or may not know that there is a power difference between us. So this motion seeks to reaffirm to our own staff that while it may have escaped the minds of the MAV tribunal, that our real intention is that we won't have events like that again, and that we would allow staff to meet freely without intervention from people from this space.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Fontana. Nothing further to add. Do I have any other speakers either for or against? Councillor Barr, speaking for or against?
Can I speak against it?
Yes.
Mr. Acting Mayor. I'm going to speak against it, and I want to state from the outset that I was a union organiser for 10 years. So I'm very much a supporter of unions and see them as a fundamental part of our democratic landscape. Why I am speaking against this motion, Mr. Acting Mayor, is because, first of all, I don't think we need to affirm anything because nothing's been under threat. So we have not in any way compromised employees' democratic rights. I haven't heard of a military coup taking over council, and so I suppose I'm trying to make light of it, Mr. Acting Mayor, but I really question the intention behind this notice of motion. I question whether it's put together in good faith